Mr. Schneider, can you explain for us in detail the objectives of the Apollo 8 mission?
Well, the Apollo 8 will begin gathering in for us our first information on manned lunar activities. We are particularly interested in three specific phases of the mission, namely navigation, communications, and thermal control. Each of these three activities cannot be simulated in Earth orbit, and we wish to go out to the lunar distances to find out more about them. Of course, we will be out there looking at at least one of our potential manned lunar sites, and we are, of course, looking at the moon in itself.
Mr. Schneider, will you detail the milestones of the Apollo 8 mission?
Well, on December 21st, the Saturn V will place the spacecraft into a 100-mile orbit around the Earth. Roughly 2 orbits later, that is about 2 hours and 50 minutes later, the last stage of the Saturn V will reignite, placing the spacecraft on a trajectory that will lead it out to the moon. If the crew does nothing, from there on, they will loop around the moon and return on a free return trajectory back to the Earth. However, at the backside of the moon, if things are as we expect, the crew will ignite the service propulsion system on the spacecraft and place themselves into an elliptical 60-mile by 170-mile orbit around the moon. That the next time around, they will circularize themselves at 60 miles. They'll stay there for about 10 revolutions and then make their final trans-Earth injection burn, bringing them back to the Earth with splashdown in the Pacific south of Hawaii.
Soon, the giant Saturn V will lift Apollo 8 from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, Florida, to begin its climb into space. After approximately 2 revolutions around the Earth to check out the vehicle, the crew will begin their journey to the moon by restarting the third stage engine. This single engine generates enough power to carry the men on a coasting flight to the moon. Approximately 30 minutes after leaving Earth orbit, the third stage will separate from the Apollo command and service modules. The third stage will continue on, swing by the moon, and go into a solar orbit. It will take almost 3 days from the time the men leave Earth orbit until they go into a lunar orbit. The first 2 revolutions around the moon will be made in an elliptical orbit 60 by 170 nautical miles above the lunar surface. The crew will then change to a circular orbit of 60 nautical miles. After 8 orbits, the men will spend the next 2 revolutions checking out the vehicle in preparation to return home. Their time in orbit around the moon will be approximately 20 hours. At the end of the 10th orbit, the crew will fire the main engine on the service module, which will give them the thrust needed to break away from the lunar orbit and start their trip home. The time involved in the return to Earth should take about 2.5 days. Approximately 15 minutes prior to entering Earth's atmosphere, which is about 400,000 feet altitude, the spacecraft will separate from the service module and position itself for the proper reentry. Reentry will come about 6 days and 3 hours after liftoff. The spacecraft is scheduled to land in the Pacific Ocean approximately 1,350 nautical miles south-southwest of Honolulu. Here, the mission will end. A mission designed to reap a vast harvest of knowledge on such things as deep space navigation, tracking and targeting accuracy, communications at lunar distances, lunar photography, and most important, the experience gained in going to and from the moon. Frank Borman, 40, Air Force Colonel, making his second spaceflight as commander of Apollo 8. Jim Lovell, 40, Navy Captain, holds the record for more time in space than any other man, with a total of 425 hours and 9 seconds. He will be command module pilot for the mission. Bill Anders, 35, Air Force Major, making his space debut as lunar module pilot aboard Apollo 8.
Commanding the mission, Air Force Colonel Frank Borman. He's been in space once before, making the 14-day Gemini 7 mission 3 years ago. Borman is 40, married, and has 2 teenage sons. Number 2 man in the spacecraft, Navy Captain James Lovell. He was Borman's co-pilot on Gemini 7 and then commanded Gemini 12. He has spent 425 hours in space, more than any other human. And after Apollo 8, will by himself have spent more time in space than all of the Soviet Union's cosmonauts. He is 40, married, and has 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. The third man up is Air Force Major William Anders, a rookie. This flight to the moon, his first trip into space. Anders is 35, married, and has 5 children, 4 boys and a girl.
Frank, is this lunar orbit mission too risky after only 1 manned Apollo flight?
No, Jules, as I said before, if I can honestly say this, if I thought it was too risky, I don't know how the other 2 people feel, but I wouldn't be on board. We've flown many unmanned Apollos, as you know. We have the system history of the Apollo is fantastic, and the testing, the redundancy, the quality control and the care that we've made, and then the changes that we've made since the fire. I think it's a safe vehicle. When I said it was a conservative mission, I didn't mean that I thought that there weren't risks or dangers involved, and I don't subscribe to the school that says you take more danger driving on a freeway and this sort of thing, because you don't have to study the space program too closely to realize that we're flying a Saturn V and we've got elements of danger all along the way. But I can't help thinking when I see that vehicle, the booster and the spacecraft, that we're looking at the best that American technology can produce. And I have confidence that it'll be good enough.
I'll be taking sightings on the proposed landing sites or a pseudo-landing site, which has the proper lighting conditions. I'll also be taking navigation marks on control points on the far side of the moon, that area where we don't have a good idea on the coordinates. At the same time that I'm doing the navigation, Bill, and I think you'll cover this, will be taking photography of certain areas. Bill, you want to continue?
We have several passes scheduled for strip photography of the lunar surface in order to get a better idea of some of the portions of the moon which the orbiter didn't cover too well. This will help us in tying down a lunar grid for our lunar landing missions, and will also assist us somewhat in being able to determine the exact position of the spacecraft, to see if the orbit was perturbed at all by any non-homogeneity in the lunar surface. We'll also be doing photographs of the landing site, or sites that are available depending on what day we go, the ones that Jim is tracking on. And we'll be doing some dark side photography with some high-speed film. And we have a roughly 1,200 exposures available to us, which we'll be using for targets of opportunity of various kinds. We also have 16mm camera on board, which will be used to do tracking of landing sites for training of future films and general lunar surface analysis.
For months, the 3 men have been practicing every phase of the flight, rehearsing for every contingency.
In order to master the navigational techniques that have to be proven before others can safely follow, over 200 hours have been spent in simulators, observatories, and planetariums. These navigational techniques were proven to a considerable degree during the pioneering flight of Apollo 7. Yet the upcoming flight will confront the Apollo 8 crew with even more navigational challenges. Star charts, sextant readings, and triangulation plottings have been the subject of the most extensive study since man began to fly. This is the vehicle, the mighty Saturn V, that will send the men on their 6-day trip. Standing 60 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty from first stage through the launch escape system, the vehicle weighs over 6 million pounds, most of which is propellant.
The big concern about the Saturn V launch vehicle had to do with the pogo effect, excessive longitudinal vibrations that were set up by the 7.5 million pound thrust of the 5 first-stage engines in the April Apollo 6 unmanned launch. Launch vehicle engineers licked this problem by adding a helium cushion to the cavity in the liquid oxygen pre-valve area. This broke up the sonic pressure pattern, reducing resonance and vibration. We have already shown how the adapter's structural weakness was remedied. Within the adapter, Apollo 8 carried a Lunar Module Test Article, LTAB, rather than a lunar module. This dummy lunar module and other Apollo 8 modules were mated with the vehicle early in October. The Saturn Apollo 8 space vehicle was transported from the Vehicle Assembly Building to Pad A of Complex 39 at Kennedy Space Center on October 10th. Pre-launch testing and final preparations over the ensuing 2.5 months revealed practically no problems. The ultra-cold liquid oxygen supply for the spacecraft fuel cells somehow became contaminated with nitrogen from the chilling tank. But the supply was drained and replaced, and the risk of repeated contamination avoided by substituting cryogenic oxygen for nitrogen as a chilling agent. Other very minor problems were easily overcome, a tribute to the engineers and technicians who built the complex 36-story high spaceship. The last major step in pre-launch preparations was to complete the fueling of the 3-stage launch vehicle. Fully fueled, Apollo Saturn V contains over 5.5 million pounds of propellants, with a total thrust capability of almost 9 million pounds.
The Apollo spacecraft, product of 8 years of design, construction, testing, redesign, and more testing. The spacecraft proved itself worthy during its initial test flight of Apollo 7. Traveling more than 4.3 million miles in Earth orbit, the vehicle responded to each command in a manner that left no doubt in the minds of scientists, engineers, and Apollo crewmen that the craft is indeed capable of carrying 3 men around the moon.
The launch on the Saturn V was an incomparable experience. The vehicle, as you know, weighs over 6 million pounds, and I found out by reading one of the press releases that it burns fuel at the rate of 15 tons a second, which impressed me mightily. But
the engines are armed. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have liftoff. The clock is running. We have liftoff.
Roger, clock.
7:51 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Cleared the tower.
Roll a pitch program.
Roger.
How do you hear, Houston?
Loud and clear.
the actual launch itself was very similar to the Titan launch as far as the Titan Gemini launch as far as we were concerned, with the exception that as we cleared the tower, the noise within the spacecraft became so loud that effective inter-crew communication was, for all practical purposes, lost.
Mark, mode 1 Bravo, Apollo 8.
Mode 1B.
Apollo 8, you're looking good.
Roger.
We're looking good. And we're a little more than half a mile into the sky and about nearly 4 miles downrange.
1 minute 40 seconds. All looks great.
Mark, mode 1 Charlie, Apollo 8. Mode 1C.
6/10 into the mission, and Frank Borman has confirmed each event as it's been passed to him by Mike
Apollo 8
Collins.
Houston, you are go for staging, over.
The crew has been given a go for staging. Inboard, out, on time, Frank Borman says.
The G's build up rapidly. We had a rapid and sudden staging event, which seemed to me to be more abrupt than the Gemini staging. And then came the old man's boosters, the Saturn II and the Saturn 4B, the S-4B. It's a very comfortable ride. We sat, and Jim was able to plot out the trajectory in real time and assure me continually that we were on track and on station. So we injected into orbit with really a nominal, almost a perfect booster. The only thing that we noticed of any concern at all was a slight oscillation about 30 seconds toward the end, 30 seconds from the end of the S2 stage burn. Now, I've been assured by Dr. von Braun that that was not a pogo. We didn't get any feedback or any coupling with the structure. It was merely a oscillation in the oxidizer pump of one of the S2 engines, so it was really no problem. I think it's important to note that this is the same Saturn V that on its last flight suffered severe oscillations in the first stage, and we've fixed it perfectly. And if any of you are familiar with the complications of decoupling a structure in an engine, you know that that was a mighty task.
At 8 minutes 44 seconds into the flight, Mission Control in Houston, Texas, confirmed second stage shutdown and separation. The third stage was then ignited for the first time to place itself and the Apollo spacecraft, a 283,000-pound payload, into a planned 119-mile-high Earth parking orbit. During 2 revolutions of the Earth, the crew checked spacecraft and launch vehicle systems in preparation for reignition of the third stage and insertion into a lunar trajectory. A similar check was conducted at Mission Control. This was the first commit point in the flight. Mission Control gave the go-ahead for Trans-Lunar insertion.
TLI, Trans-Lunar Insertion. This was the commitment. Borman, Lovell, and Anders were ready for the maneuver that would send them to the moon.
Apollo 8 Houston. Go ahead, Houston. Apollo 8, you are go for TLI, over. Roger, understand, we're go for TLI. Apollo 8 coming up on 20 seconds to ignition. Mark it, and you're looking very good.
The third stage engine was reignited at 2 hours, 50 minutes, and 36 seconds into the flight.
Ignition. Roger, ignition.
Lovell confirms ignition. And the thrust is okay, booster says.
Apollo 8 Houston, you're looking good.
On board the spacecraft and in mission control, the men of Apollo 8 watched the readouts.
Apollo 8 Houston, trajectory and guidance look good, over. Roger, Apollo 8, good here.
Velocity buildup in feet per second. The numbers snowballing toward the velocity that would allow the spacecraft to escape Earth's gravity.
Apollo 8 Houston, you're looking good here, right down the center line. Roger, Apollo 8.
The engine burned for 5 minutes and 19 seconds, raising Apollo 8's speed to a velocity of 24,200 miles per hour.
Okay, we got Seco right on the money. Roger, understand Seco.
And Borman says we've got Seco. Cutoff was right on the second.
For the first time, man had left his home planet to begin a trans-lunar flight through space. The third stage had performed its function perfectly. and 20 minutes after trans-lunar insertion, spacecraft separation occurred.
The crew of Apollo 8 turned around for a look.
This is Apollo 8 on VHF and S-band. How do you read?
You're loud and clear, Bill. How me?
Read you loud and clear. We've stepped. Looking good.
Right here, looking good here.
Following a short period of station keeping, the spacecraft moved away in preparation for third stage fuel dump. The remaining liquid oxygen in the third stage was then released, which increased the velocity of the stage on a new trajectory. This eliminated the possibility of recontact with the spacecraft by placing the stage in a trajectory passing behind the moon and into solar orbit.
In orbit, the S-4B was a particularly smooth vehicle. We went almost 2 complete orbits with it under control. Although we could see the flashes of the rockets controlling it, we could not feel them, nor could we hear them. And it was a rather eerie feeling, just continually tracking the Earth without really knowing why or what was keeping us there, or how we were keeping our position. The separation and turnaround were again just about what we had expected, with the exception that the force or the thrust associated with the separation of the spacecraft from the booster was considerably more than we'd been led to expect. I think this was perhaps had something to do with the fact that we had a new system of getting the panels off the S-4B. We turned around, stayed with the S-4B, and simulated a docking maneuver, convinced ourselves that it could be easily done, and then we thrust away from the S-4B to leave it. Unfortunately, it was more friendly than we had anticipated, and it took some time and another maneuver before we could successfully really say that we were on our way.
In Earth parking orbit, I did manage to get out of my seat while Frank and Bill stayed securely strapped in, because we were going to burn the S-4B a second time, and do our first optics check and alignment of the platform, which of course is very important before we commit ourselves to the trans-lunar voyage. I did notice when I was getting out of the seat that my past experience included many hours in Gemini, but I was strapped in the seat in Gemini, and Apollo offers quite a larger volume than the Gemini spacecraft, and I found myself floating all over the place at first. After we committed ourselves to the trans-lunar voyage, of course, one of our jobs is navigation. In Gemini, it's easy to predict yourself. The ground tracks you quite closely. But when we go to the moon, we don't want to run into the moon, and we want to come back at a particular angle to re-enter. And of course, if we lose communications, our onboard navigation is primed.
At 6 hours and 33 minutes into the flight, the astronauts tested the S-band high-gain steerable antenna. Owned for the first time, this small 70-inch wide antenna was used for most of the two-way transmissions between the spacecraft and mission control. The small antenna performed better than predicted. In contrast, at 3 points on Earth, huge 85-foot antenna stations were used for all telemetry, voice communications, and TV transmissions up to lunar distances. Passive thermal control of the spacecraft was then initiated and maintained throughout the mission, except during periods of navigation sightings, photography, and television transmissions. The first mid-course correction maneuver was initiated at 11 hours. A 2.4-second burn of the service propulsion engine increased the spacecraft velocity by 24.5 feet per second. The resulting trajectory was so accurate that the planned second and third maneuvers were not required.
Lovell's proficiency in navigating the spacecraft with its onboard optical instruments would eventually earn him the nickname the man with the golden fingers. His speed was such that he would be requested to slow down so that the earthbound machines recording the data could keep up with him. The accuracy of his sightings was virtually flawless, symbolic of the entire mission. A mission so accurate that several of the planned mid-course corrections would be dropped as unnecessary.
Command pilot Borman experienced some nausea at 19 hours. The two other crewmen also reported a feeling of queasiness. Following medication and a sleep period,
All three men felt well and rested. They experienced no further physical problems.
Then, on the second day out, the world looked in on the crew via television.
To a good view of the Earth, and as soon as we get to the good view of the Earth, we'll stop and let you look out the window at the scene we see. Jim Lovell's down in the lower equipment bay preparing lunch, and Bill is holding a camera here for us both. Okay, now we're coming up on the view. We really want you to see us, the view of the Earth. And if you'll break for just a minute, Bill's going to put on the large lens. So we'll be right back with you.
Okay, thank you.
That's the Earth, but it's not the telephoto lens, unfortunately. It's just a regular inside lens.
Okay, it's coming in as a real bright blob on the screen. It's hard to tell what we're looking at.
Well, you're looking through some haze on the window, too, unfortunately. And the Earth is very bright besides.
Okay, we've got the Earth in about the center of the screen and a little bit low. And it looked like there were some objects that moved across the screen at the same time. You have any comment on those?
That's my water ice coming off the vent nozzle.
Roger.
This lens doesn't seem to be working.
Okay, it's finally clear this soda. Okay.
There's a problem with the light transmission through it.
Yes, ask them, caution them against pointing it to bright Earth for too long.
This is coming to you approximately halfway between the moon and the Earth. We've been 31 hours, about 20 minutes into flight. We have about less than 40 hours left to go to the moon. You can see Bill's got his toothbrush here. He's been brushing his teeth regularly to demonstrate how things float around zero-G. Looks like he's placing the Astros the way he tries to catch that thing. Well, we're all in very good shape. Jim is busy working, preparing lunch. Bill is playing cameraman right now, and I'm about to take a light reading on the Earth. We all feel fine. It was a very exciting ride on that big Saturn, but it worked perfectly. And we're looking forward now, of course, till the day after tomorrow when we'll be just 60 miles away from the moon. Okay, Jim's going to take a shot of us from the lower equipment bay, then we have to get back to our passive thermal control, or the barbecue mode, so that we don't get one side of the spacecraft too hot for too long a time. So we'll be signing off here and looking forward to seeing you all again shortly.
Roger.
Goodbye from Apollo 8.
So Apollo 8 glided on silently, farther from Earth than man had ever before been, a microscopic dot of life in the cosmic void. Around the world, in Goldstone, California, Madrid, Spain, Canberra, Australia, the gigantic antennas of the Deep Space Network tracked Apollo 8, received its communiques, picked up the voice of its telemetry.
Hello, Houston, this is Apollo 8. We have a television camera pointed directly at the Earth now.
Flight Network, stations report a good sync pulse, but no live.
Roger, Frank. We're picking something up on our TV. It's not very good so far, but let us have it, and we'll have more insight.
Getting a good sync pulse, but no live video at this time.
Okay, it's coming into view now, Frank.
Here we go.
Okay.
Looking better. You're holding up about 1 to 2 o'clock. Looking better. Give us a little more in that same direction. You're down at 3 o'clock now. We see about half of what you see. Too much. It's disappearing at our 5 o'clock. Now it's coming back. It's coming back in now. It's headed toward the center of our screen. Mark, it's right in the center of our screen. And just hold her steady.
what you're seeing, Mike, is Houston, what you're seeing is the Western Hemisphere. Looking, the top is the North Pole. In the center, just lower to the center, is South America, all the way down to Cape Horn. I can see Baja California and the southwestern part of the United States. There's a big long cloud bank going northeast. Covers a lot of the Gulf of Mexico, going up to the eastern part of the United States. And it appears now that the east coast is cloudy. I can see clouds over parts of Mexico. The parts of Central America are clear. And we can also see the light bright spot of the subsolar point on the light side of the Earth.
Roger, could you give us some idea about the colors? And also, could you try a slight maneuver? It's disappearing, or we're seeing about half of it. It's going off to our 12 o'clock. Now it's going off to our 3 o'clock. That's the wrong direction. Yeah, that's a good direction.
Okay, for colors, the waters are all a sort of a royal blue. Clouds, of course, are bright white. The reflection off the Earth appears much greater than the moon. The land areas are generally a brownish, sort of dark brownish to light brown in texture. Many vortices of clouds can be seen of various weather cells. And then a long band of appears cirrus clouds that extend from the entrance to the Gulf of Mexico, going straight out across the Atlantic.
Okay, stop right there. Now you're back where you were, and we need a motion that's about 90 degrees to that last one you gave us. That's the wrong 90 degrees. 180 degrees away from that one. Stop right there. Okay, now we've lost a different half of it. I need a motion 90 degrees to that last one.
Okay, the polarizing filter is in front.
Flight, Capcom, you got any other suggestions on what you want them to try here?
Well, I hope that everyone enjoyed the pictures that we're taking of themselves. How far away from Earth now, Jim, about?
We have you about 180,000.
Looking at yourself. Alright, you're looking at yourselves as seen from 180,000 miles out in space. Mike, what I keep imagining is if I'm some lonely traveler from another planet, what do I think about the Earth from this altitude? Whether I think it'd be inhabited or not.
You don't see anybody waving, is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just kind of curious whether I would land on the blue or the brown part of the Earth. You better hope we land in the blue part.
Well, and so are we. So are we, babe.
Jim is always for land landings.
All right, this picture is drifting off center again. If you could make another correction to bring it back, I couldn't tell you which direction, but you're going the right way. You're going the right way. A little bit more. A little bit more. Whoa, stop right there. That's the best centering we've had, Apollo 8. If you can just hold that, that's perfect.
Mike, to give you some idea, Mike, what we can see, I can pick out the southwest coastline of the Gulf and where Houston should be, and also the mouth of the Mississippi. I can see Baja California, And that particular area, I'm using a binocular, which we have aboard.
You're still very well centered with your picture. We noticed a couple of jumps in the apparent intensity. Did you make some filter changes?
Roger, we tried to put that other red filter in front of it, but it didn't seem to fit.
Roger. We'd, on a final test, when you get down to the end of your allotted time here, we'd like you to remove all filters and let us see how it looks with all filters removed, and then we'd like to get several spot meter readings at the very end after the test.
You still haven't maxed the lenses off now?
Roger, we have it, and if you could maneuver toward the terminator slightly, you would again center our picture. Flight, you got any final comments?
Okay, this is Apollo 8 signing off for today.
Good show, Apollo 8. We appreciate it. See you mañana.
Shortly after they turned off the television camera, Borman, Lovell, and Anders ended their long climb away from Earth. Crossing the point where the gravity of Earth and Moon just balanced, they became the first men to fall toward another celestial body.
I did have a chance during our particular translunar voyage to take a look at the Earth, and I might say there is a sensation to the stomach that is hard to describe when you see the Earth slowly recede from you. We made 2 burns, translunar. The first one was with the SPS engine, and we did that particularly to check out the engine so that we knew that we had a good engine when we arrived at the Moon. Our second maneuver, and only 2 totally en route, was a burn of, I believe, 4 feet per second, and this was to get our closest approach to the Moon at about 60 nautical miles. I might add that the S-4B, the big booster of the third stage, put us on such a precise trajectory that we actually had to burn out of it a little bit so we could use the SPS engine. Of course, the big milestone for the 3 of us as we approached the Moon, and I might add that we never really saw the Moon. It was a crescent moon, and most of it was dark. I saw it several times in the optics as I was doing some sightings. But by and large, the body that we were rendezvousing with that was coming from one direction as we were going to another, we never saw. And we took it on faith that the Moon would be there.
Now the time approached for the most immense commitment of the mission, Lunar Orbit Insertion, LOI. A burn of the service module engine would place Apollo 8 into orbit around the Moon. Up to this time, without further major maneuvers, the spacecraft would loop around the Moon and return to Earth. Once the burn was made, Apollo 8 would be held by the Moon's gravity field until a later burn would push it free.
As Apollo 8 neared the Moon, another extensive evaluation of all systems was conducted by the crew and Mission Control. Mission Control and the astronauts decided to commit for lunar orbit.
Apollo 8, this is Houston at 6804, your goal for LOI.
Okay, Apollo 8 is go.
You're riding the best bird we can find.
Lunar orbit insertion would take place on the backside of the Moon. With the Moon between the spacecraft and the Earth, all contact would be lost until it appeared on the other side. In Mission Control, they anticipated LOS, loss of signal, from Apollo 8.
On the other side.
On Christmas Eve, at 69 hours and 8 minutes, the service module propulsion system was fired to deboost the spacecraft into lunar orbit.
And we made the burn of some 4 minutes. I might add that I have all the confidence in the world of the engine we had. It was a beautiful maneuver, and suddenly we found ourselves in lunar orbit.
Now, Mission Control and the world could only wait. Wait for the first contact with Apollo 8 as it emerged from behind the Moon.
We've got it. Apollo 8 now in lunar orbit. There's a cheer in this room. This is Apollo Control Houston, switching now to the voice of Jim Lovell. By 60.5. Good to hear your voice.
the burn was as close to perfect as possible.
The initial elliptical orbit was 69 by 193 miles above the lunar surface.
Well, we were in lunar orbit after our burn on the backside of the moon, or in the Terra. It's very heavily cratered. We referred to it as sand, really dirty beach sand or dark gray. Very little color, if any at all, maybe just a faint whiff of brown.
What does the old moon look like from 60 miles, over?
Okay, Houston. The moon is essentially gray. No color. Looks like plaster of Paris. Or sort of a grayish beach sand. We can see quite a bit of detail. The Sea of Fertility doesn't stand out as well here as it does back on Earth. Not much contrast between that and the surrounding craters. The craters are all rounded off. There's quite a few of them. Some of them are newer. Some look like, especially the round ones, look like hit by meteorites or projectiles of some sort.
These history-making scenes were transmitted to the world via television from Apollo 8 in orbit of the moon.
Say, Bill, how would you describe the color of the moon from here?
The color of the moon looks a very whitish gray, like dirty beach sand, and with lots of footprints in it.
Don't these new craters look like pickaxes striking concrete, leaving a lot of fine haze dust?
You should see the horizon now in the top of your picture.
Roger, we have the horizon, Bill.
Also, I'm fogging up the window here, Houston, is one of the other problems.
Roger, Bill, the other window was better than this one.
Okay.
Yeah, much better picture, Bill, much better.
All right, the right side of the camera is pointing retrograde. Okay, we're coming up on the crater Collins.
Roger, what crater is that that's just going off?
That's some small impact crater.
Roger.
We'll call it John Aaron's.
Okay.
In order to come across the target area with the television.
Roger.
Landing site area.
Roger, Bill.
How's that crater right in the middle look now?
Roger, that's a very good one. That must be O'Neill.
Right.
Roger, Bill, we see O'Neill real well. Also the smaller crater off to the side of it.
That's Dennis.
Roger.
Houston, this is Apollo 8. We're going to terminate our program for this pass and get on with preparations for LOI 2 if you say we're go.
Apollo 8, this is Houston. Roger.
This is the Sea of Tranquility, I believe, and we're approaching what was one of our main objectives in the flight, was to observe one of our landing sites. It's a landing site on the eastern side of the moon as we see it from Earth. It's called East 2, and our job was to look at the landing site to see whether the sun angles were correct as had been predicted for observing or for proper landing. We had two initial points coming into the actual landing site area. We weren't too sure when we got to the moon whether we could find a small crater which we are using as actually a pseudo landing site, which was just short of East 2. And so we used, first of all, a rill. This was called the initial point 1. And as our track continued on into the Sea of Tranquility, we came up to initial point 2, a triangular shaped mountain. It appeared that from the first initial point right on through to our landing site area, the lighting conditions are sufficient and adequate for a lunar landing, which is one of our objectives of the flight.
During lunar orbit, The astronauts were out of communication contact for about 45 minutes each time they moved behind the moon. On the dark side of the moon, tracking and general photography of the lunar surface was performed. On the light side of the moon, lunar landmark sightings and tracking of potential landing areas for future missions were conducted. A huge crater and other prominent Lorraine features were photographed, including a high mountain in the center of a crater on the back side of the moon. The astronauts also turned their cameras toward a bright object on the horizon, the Earth.
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, that's pretty. Got a color film, Jim? Hand me a roll of color, quick.
Oh man, that's great. Where is it?
Quick. There's several of them here. Wait a minute, let's get the right setting here. Calm down, Lovell.
Oh, I got it right. Oh, that's a beautiful shot.
Here was a welcome view, our first view of the Earth over the lunar horizon. I think you can see a corner of Africa showing up.
Then a Christmas Eve message the world could not forget.
Loud and clear. Good picture.
What you're seeing as we cross by sea are the craters Castor and Gilbert. And what we've noticed especially that you cannot see from the Earth are these small, bright impact craters that dominate the lunar surface.
Flight network, as soon as that picture settles down good, they'll tweak a little at the site, help it some.
Roger.
The horizon here is very, very stark. The sky is pitch black and the Earth, or the moon rather, excuse me, is quite light. And the contrast between the sky and the moon is a vivid dark line. Coming into view of the camera now are some interesting old double ring craters. Some interesting features that are quite common in the Mare region and have been filled by some material, same consistency of the Mare and same color. Here are 3 or 4 of these interesting features.
Okay, we can wait. The picture is loud and clear, and the picture looks real fine. System look good, fine. Roger.
Thank you. We're now approaching a series of small impact craters. There is a dark area between us and them, which could possibly be a old lava flow. You can see the large mountains on the horizon now, ahead of the spacecraft to the north of our track. How's your picture quality, Houston?
This is phenomenal.
There's an interesting rill directly in front of the spacecraft now. Running along the edge of a small mountain, rather sinuous shape with right angle turns. We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness.
And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day.
And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
There was little time for the crew of Apollo 8 to reflect. The next job was to make sure that the spacecraft was ready for the most critical maneuver of the mission.
After 10 lunar revolutions, a total of about 20 hours in lunar orbit, the astronauts prepared for trans-Earth injection and returned to their home planet. Reignition of the service propulsion system to escape the pull of lunar gravity was critical.
There was no go, no-go decision on this one. It had to go.
All systems are go, Apollo 8.
Thank you.
On the backside of the moon, at 89 hours, 19 minutes, on prior direction from mission control, the astronauts fired the engine of the service module for 203 seconds.
On the ground, men waited.
Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston.
Houston, Apollo 8, over.
Hello, Apollo 8. Loud and clear.
Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus.
That's affirmative. You're the best ones to know.
3 very tired astronauts were on their way home.
During the 2-day, 9-hour return trip to Earth, additional navigational sightings were performed and communication and thermal control tests conducted. Apollo 8's primary guidance and navigation system was operated automatically for controlling the spacecraft's return trajectory. Mission Control updated return course information to the command module computer at least every 10 hours. A planned mid-course correction was initiated at the 15th hour of trans-Earth flight. A velocity correction of only 5 feet per second ensured entry into the Earth's atmosphere within the mathematically computed Earth entry corridor.
Before we begin, I would like to announce on behalf of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration that Frank Borman,
this crater of this nature had been postulated in this position, rays coming from the near side in this direction. It's the first time it was ever photographed in this high a sun angle, which brought out these features so dramatically. These long rays girdle the moon for quite a distance.
After catching up on their rest, homeward bound, there was more a mood of elation, contrasted with the outbound loneliness.
I told Michael you guys are up there, and he said, who's driving?
That's a good question. I think Isaac Newton's doing most of the driving right now.
As many of us sat down to our Christmas meal, Borman, Lovell, and Anders were enjoying theirs.
It appears that we did a grave injustice to the food people. Santa Claus brought us a TV dinner each, which is delicious. Turkey and gravy, cranberry sauce, grape punch, outstanding.
Roger, Jim. Glad to hear it. You know, we're down here eating cold coffee and bologna sandwiches.
As on the way out, there were periods of work. The navigational ability of the spacecraft and crew was proving phenomenal. And periods of rest, a single man on watch.
Well, Ken, that just leaves you or I. How about you and I? Anything exciting happened today?
Real quiet down here. Everybody's smiling. Everything's pretty calm. like it should be on Christmas.
Very good.
Yeah, Milt says we're in a period of relaxed vigilance.
Very good. We'll relax, you be vigilant.
It looks like you're okay, but somebody else is upside down.
Okay, that's right. That's Jim Lovell. What we thought we'd do today was just show you a little bit about life inside Apollo 8. We've shown you the scenes of the moon, scenes of the Earth, and we thought we'd invite you into our home. It's been our home at least for 4 days. You can see on the instrument panel, we mark off each day on the instrument panel. We've 4 down and we're working on the 5th day. Of course, we're all looking forward to the landing on Friday. And down here in the part of the spacecraft that we call the lower equipment bay, we have the President's Advisor on Physical Fitness, Captain Jim Lovell, about to undergo an exercise program that we do every day. You notice that he floats around very freely. Another very important function of our spacecraft is the computer. And I thought you might be interested in seeing what we have here. The displays that gives us all the information about our burns, about navigating, and about the velocity that we use during entry and retrofire on Earth orbital mission. You can see it's controlled by a disk key, or similar to a typewriter keyboard, and the things that go in and out of that are absolutely miraculous. It's done a fantastic job for us, and Jim Lovell's done an excellent job operating it. The food is varied, generally pretty good. Well, here we have some cocoa, which will be good. I'll be adding about 5 ounces of hot water to that. I hope that you all had better Christmas dinners today than this, but nevertheless, we thought you might be interested in how we eat.
I don't have any complaints around here, Frank. We'll bring you up to speed on your food when you get back.
Very good.
Looks like a happy home you got up there.
Ordinarily, we let these drinks settle for 5 or 10 minutes, but Bill's going to eat one drink it right now to get on with the program. He cuts open another flap, and you'll see a little tube comes out. And he drinks his delicious orange drink. Maybe I should say he drinks his orange drink. It's usually not that fast. Bill's really in a hurry today. That's good, but not quite as good as good old California orange juice.
Down in this area, it's called the LEB, or the Lower Equipment Bay, and we have our optics positioning equipment right here. We do all our navigation down here by sighting on stars and on the horizons of either the moon or the Earth. And this is where we find out exactly where we are in space, what direction and how fast we're traveling. And our computer, as Frank had mentioned, then takes the information and tells us how to maneuver to get home safely. I work with the scanning telescope and the sextant, and occasionally if I get too busy, I just sort of float out of sight and go up into the tunnel, which is the tunnel to the hatch of the lunar module, which we don't have aboard, of course.
Well, that's about all we have for today. Each and every one of us wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas. And I guess we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll be landing early Friday morning. Merry Christmas from Apollo 8.
Well, Roger. Merry Christmas from the ground, Apollo 8, and thank you very much for the guided tour. We really enjoyed it.
The final television transmission, 97,000 miles out, farther than man had been on any previous mission, but now tantalizingly close to home.
Good. You have it centered right now.
Well, the Earth looks a little bigger to us today. Not much, but it's somewhat bigger. You got it, Bill.
As I look down on the Earth here so far out in space, I think I must have the feeling that the travelers in the old sailing ships used to have. We've gone on a very long voyage away from home, and now we're headed back. And I have that feeling of being proud of the trip, but still happy to be going back home and back to our home port. And that's what you're seeing right here.
Roger, Bill. We should be glad to get you back, too.
Every second brought the spacecraft closer to its fiery entry, the final plunge to the safety of Earth.
On December 27th, as Apollo 8 approached Earth, the spacecraft was manually maneuvered in preparation for separation from the service module.
The pyrotechnic devices that would separate the command and service modules prior to entry were armed.
Apollo 8, Apollo 8. Your go for pyro arm. Everything's looking good.
Roger, everything's looking good here again.
On schedule, the command module jettisoned the service module to expose the main heat shield.
The spacecraft was then automatically maneuvered to the proper attitude for entry. Traveling 24,530 miles per hour, Apollo 8 began Earth entry 7.5 miles above the western Pacific Ocean.
This is the picture of the entry that we experienced over the western Pacific, and I don't believe any of us are convinced that it's either the command module or the service module. But I would like to take this opportunity here to describe the entry. It was the almost most unrealistic event of the entire flight for me. The whole spacecraft was bathed in a light that made you feel like you're inside of a neon tube. And we experienced, of course, the usual G-forces, and we sat there and watched the autopilot guide the spacecraft to a perfect pinpoint accurate landing point. Now, you should remember that the entry was made in complete darkness, and all the chutes were put out in darkness, and we were really not sure when we were going to hit the water. But once we got the main chutes out, we all sort of relaxed and felt, well, this is the end of a long, hard trip, and it's going to be great, because the Apollo 7 crew had mentioned how soft they entered the water. And just about the time we were congratulating ourselves, we hit the water with a tremendous impact. And I had been telling Bill Anders, now get the circuit breakers in for the chute release right away, because I want to get this chute off before we go over in stable 2, or nose down position. Well, Bill did his job very well, but about the time we hit with this big impact, I got doused with water that was forced its way in through some vent tubes. And I looked around to see why we were sinking. And by the time I got back to release the parachutes, we were in stable 2. So we ended up upside down in the Atlantic. We uprighted ourselves in about 4.5 minutes.
Apollo Control, Houston here at 147 hours, 13 minutes. We have been advised by the recovery forces that Recovery Helicopter 3 is hovering over the spacecraft 50 feet above it, and they estimate they're 6,000 yards away from the Yorktown. The helicopter pilot is Commander Donald S. Jones of Madison, Wisconsin. When the swimmers get the signal to deploy, the first man in the water will be a sonar technician from Columbia, South Carolina, named Chester Coggin. 2 other swimmers will follow him, Lieutenant J.G. Richard Flanagan of Oklahoma City, and Donald L. Schwab of Imperial Beach, California. And at 147 hours, 14 minutes, that's all the new information we have. In case you missed it, the order came back, we'll have steak and eggs, the same as we had before we left. Now the helicopter is maneuvering in a position to drop swimmers, and we expect that drop to start just any moment. Recovery 3 helo will deploy the swimmers. The helicopter is continue to hover between 75 to 100 feet, as low as 50 feet for certain inspection type passes. And Air Boss Lieutenant Glenn Byers of Evansville, Indiana, reports the first swimmer is in the water. And now we're advised that the swimmer has attached a sea anchor. And now the helicopter is moving in to deploy his 2 swimming colleagues. And then immediately one of the swimmers will plug in a phone and have a quick conversation with the crew. And this is Apollo Control Houston. We're advised the sea anchor has been attached. The swimmers and the helicopter report they can see a light glowing through the windows from the spacecraft. The hatch apparently not yet open. And the last measured distance we have between the Yorktown and the spacecraft is 2,900 yards.
We were in continuous contact with the Navy, and they picked us up immediately at daybreak, and I guess that was about the end of our mission.
Apollo Control Houston here, 147 hours, 49 minutes since liftoff. Now all 3 swimmers from helicopter number 3 are in the water, and they are clearly visible to the helicopter. They're working to affix the flotation collar, still an added measure of flotation insurance around the one end of the spacecraft. And immediately they'll inflate the Mae West type device. And that's our situation. This is Apollo Control. Houston, we've just been advised that the hatch of Apollo 8, the hatch is now open.
There's the erection of the first astronaut. And the first astronaut is coming out of the CM now. Now in the raft. Roger, he's now sitting in the raft alongside. Second astronaut in the raft. He's upside the end of his time. The astronaut on his entrance.
This is Apollo Control, Houston. We have learned within the last couple of minutes that the crew has transferred to a new life raft. For what reason, we don't know. But we do know they're in a second life raft now, and the recovery helicopter is maneuvering to begin the pickup operation.
Basket is at the raft. The basket is now in the raft, and the first astronaut is a basket. First astronaut on the way up. Astronaut is about halfway up.
That the first astronaut is in the helicopter. No more identification than that, just first astronaut in a helicopter.
Going down for the second astronaut.
Now the line is going down for the second astronaut. And the line is dangling and awaiting a pickup of the second man. Second astronaut's on his way up. Second astronaut in the sling and on his way.
Astronaut is halfway to the helo at this time. Is halfway up.
And now we have it confirmed that the second astronaut is in the recovery helicopter.
Helo is again over the CM. Basket going down.
And the line is going down for the third astronaut. Earlier we had given a position of the carrier only 1,500 yards from the scene. That was incorrect. It should be corrected. The position at that time was 3,500 yards from the scene, and the carrier is making its swing now, preparatory to spacecraft pickup. All right, the third astronaut is in the sling and is being brought up into the helicopter. And the third astronaut steps into the helo at 11:14 Houston time. The helicopter pilot confirms that the helo door has been secured. All three men are aboard, and they are preparing to embark on a short flight to the Yorktown. Situation out there. Navy helicopter number 66 prepares to touch down on the deck of the Yorktown. And touchdown at 20 minutes after the hour, 11:20 Central Standard Time.
Helicopter landed.
For those reporters not looking at a television monitor, the engines are being shut down now. 2 crew members have moved out to block them, block the wheels.
Recovery one is back on the station on top of CM.
The cordon forms up. Captain Fifield, the commanding officer, stands out.
Go John Stonecipher and Ben James. Mr. Stonecipher is the chief of the NASA recovery team on board. He slips briefly, shaking hands with one of the astronauts. Here comes astronaut Borman and Lovell and Anders standing on the steps, and a great cheer goes up from the sailors out here on the flight deck. All of them looking in very good condition, needing a shave, of course. Shaking hands with Ben James. There's Captain Lovell shaking hands with Ben James. Walking slowly down the red carpet, accompanied by John Stonecipher and Ben James, the 3 astronauts. Lovell having a very noticeable beard. Frank Borman looks as if he is shaved. All 3 salute. Captain Fifield is at the microphone.
On behalf of the entire Yorktown crew, a most hearty welcome aboard and congratulations on a tremendously successful flight. Colonel Borman, would you care to say a few words to the crew?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, we're just very happy to be here, and we appreciate all your efforts. And I know you had to stay out here over Christmas, and that made it tough. Jim and I always seem to fly in December. We made it home before Christmas in '65, but we can't tell you much how much we really appreciate you being here and how proud it is for us to participate in this event, because thousands of people made this possible, and I guess we're all just part of the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Captain Fifield presents Yorktown caps to Colonel Borman, Captain Lovell, and Major Anders. Captain Fifield shaking hands with Colonel Borman. Colonel Borman looks as if he has grabbed a quick shave on the way back. At least there's no indication that he needs a shave in the sense that Lovell and Anders do. Walking slowly down the flight deck now, all of them wearing their Yorktown caps.
Go ahead.
With the scrambled eggs on the front, scrambled eggs, indicating their rank. Colonel Borman of the Air Force, Captain Lovell of the Navy, and in the middle, Major Anders of the Air Force. Walking slowly down the flight deck of the aircraft carrier Yorktown, with Captain Fifield on the left of Captain Lovell. Behind him, Ben James, and over to the right, John Stonecipher, the senior NASA Public Affairs, senior NASA official on board. Over they go to the flight deck, to the number 3 elevator. This very small party, followed by a very large group of sailors, standing on the number 3 elevator, waiting for just the last moment or two before they are taken down to sick bay to commence their physical examination. But we already know the verdict of that examination. The astronauts are obviously in the very best of condition.
Borman did shave. He had an electric shaver in the spacecraft. He used it.
And down goes elevator number 3 with astronauts Borman, Lovell, and Anders back from space and safe now aboard the aircraft carrier Yorktown. And down there on the hangar deck is Ron Nissen.
The elevator has just reached the hangar deck level, and the 3 astronauts are walking through the roped-off area wearing their white coverall uniforms. Borman does seem to be clean-shaven.
Of the Yorktown, Captain Fifield.
Good evening, gentlemen. I know that you share my pleasure our ability to host such distinguished guests as we have tonight. And I wonder, as long we're thinking about it, why they took the long way around to get here. I will introduce them individually, and then I think they will each have a word to say. First of all, at the end of the table, Colonel Frank Borman, the cleanest shaven astronaut of them all. Although his compatriots will indicate that he doesn't have to shave anyways. Next, Captain Jim Lovell, who says after a few days with the Air Force, he's glad to be back with the Navy. And next, Major Bill Anders, an escapee from the Navy, who claims the moon is made of American cheese.
Thank you very much. I can understand why you all like the Navy. We don't have many candlelight dinners in the Air Force, but I really don't know what I can say in a situation like this. We're very grateful for your participation. You stayed out here over Christmas, and you picked us up right on time, and you treated us royally. I guess the most effective words are just plain thank you, and I appreciate all your contribution. Really, a lot of the attention gets focused on the flight crew, but there's a great vast reservoir of people that support us, and I guess we all did this, and we appreciate your help very much. Thank you.
I appreciate being back home again. I've been living with 2 Air Force men for a week now, and their constant concern was, gee whiz, we're going back and landing in that big Pacific Ocean, and you sure the Navy's going to be there? Well, about 3 years ago, Frank and I were in the same situation, a little spacecraft called Gemini, and he asked me the same question 3 years ago, and I said, the Navy will always pick us up, will always take care of us, and we've been right all the time, and I really appreciate seeing the good work that you've done, and I think it's a very good job, and I appreciate being here.
I'd like to correct one thing. I wasn't worried about landing here near the ship. I was just worried about hitting any ocean. Jim was the navigator. And he and I went to the same school, so I know. I just like to reiterate what Frank was saying, is that the recovery forces, in our opinion, are as important a link in the Apollo program as the flight crews, and we just want to thank you all for a job well done.
Mr. President, I thought that we had experienced every motion known to man in the 20 hours we spent in lunar orbit, but I must confess that I believe this just topped it. And I know I speak for Jim and Bill when I say we're 3 grateful Americans. Grateful to you personally. We recognize your interest and your contribution to the space program of our country, and we're grateful to this wonderful country. They've supported us in every way. And although we're symbolic of the country's greatness, we certainly feel very inadequate. And we're just very, very grateful. And sir, we did want to give you 2 things. We carried with us a space treaty around the moon, and Bill Anders would like to present that to you. Mr. President, Jim Lovell has a picture of the ranch I think he'd like to see.
Technically, the objectives of the mission were completely and successfully accomplished. After the Apollo 9 and 10 missions verify lunar module and EMU functions in the first half of 1969, the United States will be ready to place men on the surface of the moon.